All right, good morning, everyone. Hopefully you can all see our slide, a cover slide titled Solar Massachusetts Renewable Target Smart Informational Webinar for Public Entities. If that is not the webinar you are trying to listen to, then you are in the wrong place. If you are here to listen to that one, then welcome. Apologies for the slight delay this morning, but we will just jump right in. My name is Eric Friedman. I'm the director of the Leading by Example program here at the Department of Energy Resources, and I'm very pleased this morning to be joining with my colleagues here at DOER to give this presentation and provide some additional information specifically geared toward public entities to help move the conversation forward related to the new Solar Massachusetts Renewable Target, otherwise known as SMART. We know this is a complex and interesting topic, and this is really just the beginning of the dialogue and series of conversations that we plan to have with many of you. So before we jump into our information, the agenda today is to do just kind of a very quick overview of the Leading by Example program, which I will do. I will then turn it over to Joanne Becerra, the Deputy Director of the Green Communities Program, who will talk briefly about the Green Communities Program, and then the bulk of the webinar here today will be Katelyn Kelly, who is our Solar Program Manager, and she will be walking through in extensive detail information related to the SMART program design that is currently available for everyone to see, as well as some brief information about the current extension related to the current SREC 2 program. Before we get started, just some administrative things to go over. First of all, the webinar is being recorded and will be available approximately 48 hours after today. Let's assume business hours, not weekend hours. If, however, you cannot wait for the PowerPoint to be available online, there should be a camera icon on the top right of your screen, and that will enable you to save any slides for future reference. As we are moving forward, if you have any questions, there should be a Q&A icon on your screen. You should feel free to type in any questions at any point during the presentation, and following the completion of the presentation, we will be looking at those questions and trying to answer as many of those as we can in the time allotted. And also, the slide presentation will be posted along with the recording. Okay, so I'm just going to start with a very brief overview of the Leading by Example program. I will turn it over to Joanne to do the same for Green Communities, and then we'll jump into the meat of the discussion. As many of you know, the Leading by Example program has been around for a while. We operate under an executive order that has set some pretty aggressive targets for state government to achieve. You can see a couple of those key targets there: 30% of our electricity coming from renewable energy by 2020, and a 40% greenhouse gas emission reduction by 2020 as well, from a baseline starting in around 2004. We cover pretty much all of state government, work with executive agencies, all of our public colleges and universities, many of our public authorities. We have a very large footprint that ranges from 80 million square feet of buildings, thousands of vehicles, and our associated environmental impacts are large as well, with over 1 million metric tons of greenhouse gas emissions emitted every year. Our program works with all of those entities listed above in a variety of ways to try and support efforts to reduce energy use, increase use of renewables, and reduce overall environmental impacts. And we do things ranging from collecting and analyzing data to track progress and help prioritize projects. We have a number of programs where we provide technical assistance. We have funding available through grants and or through financing opportunities. We are constantly looking for innovative technologies that we help agencies and campuses identify and potentially pilot. And we do a number of educational and outreach efforts that help to support our programs and hopefully provide many of our state government colleagues with relevant information and support. Because we're talking about solar, I did want to just quickly go over some of the great progress we have seen at state facilities over the last number of years in terms of installed solar. There's a lot of information on here. I'll just kind of highlight some of the major progress here. We are currently at over 21 megawatts of installed solar at state facilities. That is as of the end of calendar year 2016, and we have another at least 3.5 megawatts in the pipeline that we know of that are in various stages of design and construction. This is pretty significant progress. You can see all the way back to 2007 when we had just over 100 kilowatts of solar installed, and lots of progress since 2011 when the ARA program started, and also some significant installations in the last couple of years with large solar canopies being installed at various facilities. So we hope to continue this progress and are very excited about the new incentive program and are learning, along with many of you, also how those programs can apply to state facilities. And this webinar will help provide some information related to how state agencies will continue to be able to take advantage of those incentives. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Joanne Becerra from the Green Communities Division.
Good morning, everyone. I am Joanne Becerra. I'm the Deputy Director of the Green Communities Division here at DOER, and I'm just going to talk briefly about the Green Communities program. Basically, we are similar to the Leading by Example, except instead of working with state facilities, we work with cities and towns. We work with all cities and towns, not just ones that are green communities, with anything that's energy related, so including energy efficiency, vehicles, and also municipal buildings. We also provide technical assistance for communities that are seeking renewable energy projects. There we go. And we have a variety of different grants and resources available for cities and towns. We have our landmark designation and grant program, which we have 189 green communities right now. We have energy benchmarking and tracking tool called Mass Energy Insight, which I know a lot of municipalities are working on. We have municipal energy technical assistance, where we provide small grants to cities and towns, regional school districts, wastewater and water districts to help analyze specific energy problems that they may have. And this could be anything from getting some ASHRAE level 2 audits in oil-heated buildings to hiring a consultant to help do a solar feasibility study on municipal or school properties. We also have folks on staff that can help with energy management services procurement, and we've got a lot of information on our website. If you haven't received an email from us regarding this webinar, you should sign up for our listserv, and there's the address at the bottom of the slide. Key to our success is we have folks out in the field that are working directly with cities and towns and volunteers. Jim Barry's in Western Mass. Kelly Brown is in the Central region. Seth Pickering's in the Southeast region, and I'm currently still wearing the Northeast Regional Coordinator hat. So we're able to, sit down and meet with cities and towns directly in your offices and help you figure out your energy goals. There's our map of the 185 green communities. We had a great bumper crop this past year of designating 30 new communities, and we're working hard in helping them achieve their energy goals. And we're still recruiting new ones, so if you're from a municipality that's not a green community, please reach out to your regional coordinator or myself, and we can get you started. Now I'd like to pass the baton over to Katelyn Kelly, who's going to tell us all about the SMART program and how both cities and towns as well as state entities can access resources and funding and how it's all going to work. So go away.
Thanks, Joanne. Good morning, everybody. So some of you have probably seen or read things recently about the SMART program, the Solar Massachusetts Renewable Target Program. The SMART program is going to be a 1,600 megawatt AC declining block program. It applies to all investor-owned electric distribution companies, so Eversource, National Grid, and Unitil. The SMART program does not apply to municipal light districts. We are working on a different program for them, and I'll touch on that later in the slides. The way that the SMART program works, it's the same compensation rate across the state. So each block has different compensation rates, and they apply equally across all of the service territories. The base compensation rate and the fixed price term are set according to project size. And smaller projects, 25 kW or less, have 10-year terms, and over 25 kW have 20-year terms. The structure is differentiated between size to load and standalone systems. And then you have your base compensation rate based on the size of the project, but then you also can qualify for adders based on location and projects that provide unique benefits, including community solar, low income, public facilities, and energy storage projects. The compensation rates decline by set percentages in each block following block 1. We are proposing that they decline by 4%. And the maximum project size is 5 megawatts AC per parcel. So just a quick side-by-side comparison between what we have had for the incentive program and what we're moving to. We've operated under the SREC program for a number of years now, and SRECs are a tradable commodity with a value that's based entirely on market conditions. So because it's a market-based incentive program, there is some long-term revenue uncertainty, which leads to higher financing costs. And a good portion of the program costs are associated with soft costs for third-party financing. And because of this, program costs and ratepayer impacts are difficult to predict. The SRECs are completely separate from the energy. They're entirely for the environmental attributes, so they are an additional incentive on top of any energy-based incentive and revenue you may receive. The declining block program provides long-term revenue certainty because we're setting one rate that encompasses both energy and incentive values. So because of this, total program costs can be predicted with greater certainty. There's fewer financing risks, so lower soft costs. And we are setting the incentives to decline with the declining cost of solar, so we can really claim the benefits of lower solar installation costs. A solar facility will receive a single compensation rate that encompasses both the incentive and the energy revenue that you receive for your system. Some additional program features. The initial compensation rates are going to be set through a competitive procurement. So we're going to start the program with a competitive procurement for projects greater than 1 megawatt. And through this, we will not only determine the compensation rate for those projects, but also for the rest of the incentive program. And we're going to do that using indices to set capacity-based rate compensation for projects less than or equal to 1 megawatt. Projects eligible for the incentive can elect to receive compensation for energy through one of 3 mechanisms. So net metering, which you're probably all familiar with and will operate under the normal net metering rules. You can qualify through an additional on-bill crediting mechanism, which I'll get into detail later, but it's essentially similar to net metering, but is specific to the SMART program. And then we're also establishing a buy-all, sell-all rate for standalone facilities. So if you're not seeking qualification under net metering or an additional crediting mechanism, you can just get a buy-all, sell-all one rate established by your base compensation rate. And as I said, the on-bill crediting mechanism is a new option. There have been some stops and starts with net metering in the past, so we wanted to create an additional option to allow projects to move forward even if net metering caps are hit. Standalone and behind-the-meter systems will have their incentives calculated using different methodologies. So we're trying to steer projects towards optimal locations, and we're also trying to steer projects towards optimal locations by providing location-based incentives. So we're trying to incentivize optimal locations, but we're also trying to disincentivize greenfield projects. We do have a greenfield subtractor that are applied to projects that set in an open space or projects that need to do some clear cutting or forest clearing. We are trying to disincentivize those types of projects for large greenfields. And we'll also have an energy storage component. This will be compensated through a variable adder that's based on the ratio of the storage capacity to solar capacity, as well as the duration of the storage unit. And we will have some minimum performance standards to apply. So the project categories for the SMART program are based on size. So we have the small project category, which, as I mentioned, has the 10-year rates. It's 25 kW or less, and we also have a specific low-income small project size that does receive a higher compensation rate. And then you have 25 to 250, 250 to 500, 500 to a megawatt, and then we'll have the 1 to 2 megawatt and the 2 to 5 megawatt. So these rates will be set through the competitive procurement in Block 1 and with fixed percentages that decline thereafter. And we'll have location-based adders for projects located on brownfields and landfills, projects that are building mounted and solar canopies. And we also have some off-taker-based adders. So depending on who you have an agreement with and are sharing bill credits with. So community shared solar, specifically low-income community shared solar, a low-income property owner, or a public facility. And then we also have a separate adder for solar plus storage. Adders can be aggregated, so you can have a location-based adder and an off-taker-based adder and some storage. You can take one from each type, so location, off-taker, or storage. And then all capacity-based rates and adders will decrease by 4% per block. The initial competitive procurement. So this is how we're going to set the prices for the entire program with this initial competitive procurement. We are establishing two different ceiling prices. So it's going to be one 100 megawatt procurement, but they're going to be different categories. So we're going to have a category for projects 1 to 2 megawatts and a category for projects 2 to 5 megawatts. And the way the procurement will work is we will set the ceiling prices, so 15 cents for the 1 to 2, 14 cents for the 2 to 5. And we'll procure bids and a clearing price will be established. And the way the clearing price will be set is we receive all of the bids, we stack them from lowest to highest, we count up to 100 megawatts. That last megawatt in sets the price for all of the projects that have submitted a bid. So that's the last price for the last qualified project is the clearing price and is set that way. And then for the rest of the size categories, their price will then be set based on indices. So for Block 1, if we have a 15-cent clearing price for 1 to 2 megawatts, 25 kW or less will be set at 30 cents. And then these are the prices set for Block 1, and they go down 4% each block thereafter. So this is just an example of what the prices will be in each size category if we have a 15-cent clearing price for the 1 to 2 megawatt procurement. So again, using the indices sets the price, and you can see what the Block 1 prices will be for each of these size categories, and then thereafter they will go down by 4% each block. And these are the proposed adder values. So again, we have 3 different categories. So we have adders based on where the location, where the project is located. So brownfields, landfills, canopies, buildings. Also adders based on who your off-taker is. So if you have a public off-taker, if you're a community shared solar project, if you are a low-income property owner or low-income community shared solar, and then we also have the solar plus storage adder. And the low-income community shared solar and specifically the low-income small project size category, the qualification for that specific adder or that specific rate is determined by whether the customer is an R2 customer. So is qualified by the utility as a low-income customer. So we are having two different calculations based on whether a project is a standalone project or a behind-the-meter project. So a standalone facility is a facility with no associated load other than parasitic or station load. So these are really your greenfield projects, your large virtually net metered projects that have no on-site load associated with the installation. And the way that these projects will have their incentive calculated is they will have their base compensation rate plus adders and then will net out the energy value that they receive. So the value of the incentive will change over time as energy increases or decreases, but their all-in compensation will stay the same. So if a standalone facility is net metered or is approved under this alternative on-bill credit, you subtract the value of the energy it generates from its all-in rate. Also, if it's not net metered or it doesn't seek an alternative on-bill crediting mechanism, essentially if it doesn't have an off-taker agreement and it's not going for one of those off-taker-based adders and you just want to build a project and basically sell everything to the utility, you just receive a single payment from the utility that encompasses your energy rate and the REC payment through the incentive. And then we have behind-the-meter facilities. So this is essentially any type of facility that's feeding some amount of on-site load. And the incentive payment will be calculated in a way so that it's actually fixed. And when you qualify for the SMART program, at that time, the calculation will be made to determine what your fixed incentive payment will be for the term of the tariff. So this is the behind-the-meter incentive calculation. So how your incentive is calculated if you are a behind-the-meter facility is you qualify at your base compensation rate, which is your capacity base rate plus any adders you may qualify for. And then you subtract the 3-year average of the volumetric delivery rates and the 3-year average of the basic service rate. So effectively, that is determined by whatever rate class that utility meter is classified at. So if you have a 10 kilowatt facility that qualifies under block 1, kind of like your average residential installation, they'll qualify at the 30-cent all-in compensation rate. Then it's interconnected behind the meter on the R1 rate class, it's the residential rate class. So you subtract out 18 cents from the 30-cent compensation rate because that's the 3-year average for that rate class for that utility as the distribution, transmission, transition, and basic service. So now, by subtracting that out, we have a 12-cent incentive value. So that is now fixed for the entire term, and for every kilowatt hour that is produced by that PV system, they will get 12 cents a kilowatt hour. So if you have a public solar canopy that is interconnected behind the meter at a campus, the project qualifies under block 1 at 15 cents per base rate. It gets the public adder of 2 cents. It gets the solar canopy adder of 6 cents. So the all-in compensation rate is now 23 cents. And it's serving some sort of on-site load at the facility. So you assume that their 3-year average for that rate class is 14 cents a kilowatt hour. The incentive rate for this facility would be 9 cents a kilowatt hour, and they receive 9 cents for every kilowatt hour of production from the PV system for 20 years. So say you have a landfill project. There are a lot of landfill projects that are publicly owned. Again, since it's not serving on-site load, it's a standalone facility, the incentive is calculated a little bit differently. So say it qualifies under block 1 at 15 cents, at the 15 cents base rate, you get your public adder for 2 cents and your landfill adder for 4 cents. So your all-in compensation rate is 21 cents a kilowatt hour. And it's approved for the standalone on-bill alternative crediting mechanism, which it would need to qualify for the public adder. Then the compensation rate is set at 21 cents, and what you're receiving as the incentive payment and what you're receiving as the on-bill credit is, the makeup may change, but the combination of both will always be at least 21 cents. So this is just an example of how it would work with the standalone generator. So if you have a 20-year medium system that's also net metered, or an alternative on-bill credit. In red is the amount that you receive for the incentive payment. In blue is what you receive as on-bill credits. So you can see, as over the years, if energy values go up, you're then receiving more for your on-bill credits. So if you get towards the end of your term, you may actually not receive any incentive payments, because the amount that you're receiving in the on-bill credit through your net metering credit is equal to or exceeds what your all-in rate was for the SMART program. And then if you dip down below, you start receiving actually cash incentive payments to make up the difference again. And this is a behind-the-meter generator example. So again, with this, because you're serving on-site load, and we do that calculation at the beginning to determine what your fixed incentive payment is for your entire term, that really is just a fixed payment for your REC. So you're getting that no matter what happens to energy values. You're obviously getting some value by serving on-site load with higher energy prices, but your actual incentive payment does not change. So one of the things that we're going to be doing with the SMART program is we're going to have a third-party solar program administrator. The administrator will be responsible for reviewing applications, qualifying facilities to be eligible for the SMART program, and managing the block reservations. They'll determine the total amount to be paid and credited to the facility owner and off-takers every month, and they'll also issue the incentive payments to owners on behalf of the distribution companies. And finally, they'll also act as the NEPL GIS independent verifier for all eligible systems. Another big change is a focus on land use. So with the new incentive program, one of the things that we were focusing on was really trying to get better locations and better incentive, not to incentivize solar installations in greenfield and forested areas. So what we're proposing is that ground-mounted projects that are larger than 500 kW and are not sited on a brownfield or landfill and are on land that has not been previously developed will be subject to a specific per kilowatt hour subtractor that changes based on the number of acres impacted. So if you're located on a greenfield, then you basically tell us, so the number of acres impacted is literally the size of your project, based on the square, the square footprint of the panels that you're using, and then we determine what the subtractor is. And then in addition to the subtractor, ground-mounted projects will be subject to performance standards that we're developing in consultation with the Department of Agricultural Resources. So this is just an example of what you may or may not have as your subtractor plus any adders based on your base rate. So ground-mounted projects can still qualify for adders, but we're also going to look at where they're installed to determine the subtractor. So if you're a ground-mounted project that is C&I zoned and not previously developed, your subtractor is, I'm not quite sure, I think it's 5/1000th cent per acre, or if it's not zoned for solar or C&I, it's double that essentially. So we're looking at, has the town basically identified this land to be used for commercial and industrial use or to be used for solar use, or has it not? So if it has identified the land to be used for those types of uses, you get a you don't get a subtractor. If it's not previously developed, you get a little bit of subtractor. If it's really not zoned for any type of industrial use, you get a larger subtractor. Again, the additional on-bill crediting option, this is something that we created specifically for the SMART program. So today, the vast majority of solar facilities are compensated for their energy through net metering. So we are proposing an alternative to net metering through this on-bill crediting option. We're not proposing, we're not impacting existing net metering regulations and existing net metering rules. We're just proposing an additional option. So it's going to function similarly to net metering, but only available if you qualify for the SMART program. Since this is something that has to be done by the DPU, it has to be established through the DPU approved process. So filed in conjunction with or in parallel to the filing for the incentive program. So this additional on-bill crediting option does need to be approved by the DPU in the same way that the SMART program does need to be approved by the DPU, because they have to approve the utilities for cost recovery for the program. The compensation rate for the exported energy would likely be set at basic service. That's something that we've been talking about. That's absolutely subject to change, and the details about this option will be formally and finally determined in the DPU process. But some of the benefits of having this additional on-bill credit is that we can establish a single rate for all facilities. It allows facilities to transfer credits to off-takers without net metering, but in the same way as net metering by assigning bill credits. There's no cap, there's no single parcel rule, there's no 10 megawatt public entity cap. There's the cap on the number of credits that can be transferred to an off-taker based on an off-taker's kilowatt hour consumption. That's something that we've talked about and may be included. There's also a potential for fewer limitations on the number of times off-takers can be changed or reallocated within a year, and an opportunity to streamline the administrative aspects of credit transfers through software solutions, which may apply to the third-party solar administrator that will be running the program. So just a couple updates on system type definitions from SREC 2 and moving to the SMART program. The definitions for landfills, brownfields, building-mounted, low-income properties are going to remain largely unchanged from SREC 2. We are going to slightly modify the solar canopy definition, and we're adding definitions for low-income residential, low-income community shared solar, public facilities, and energy storage. So solar canopies, the big way that we're modifying the solar canopy definition is by allowing canopies to be installed over canals, but also to be installed on agricultural land. So the agricultural canopies, we're going to be developing a guideline in consultation with the Massachusetts Department of Agricultural Resources. The intent of this is really to allow dual use of the land. So you are installing solar panels on land that remains in active agricultural use, so you can still grow crops on the land where the solar panels are installed. We're going to maintain the SREC 2 criteria and guidelines for facilities that serve low-income properties. So these are, properties like housing authorities, eligible low-income housing developments, and we're also going to provide additional support for projects that directly serve low-income residents. So projects less than or equal to 25 kW that directly serve R2 customers will be eligible for a higher base incentive rate. And also community shared solar projects that have at least 50% of their off-takers on an R2 rate will receive a higher adder for the low-income community shared solar. Public facilities. We also have included an adder for public facilities. It is slightly different than the definition of public facility under the net metering rules. The public generation unit under the SMART program has to be owner-operated by a municipality or other governmental entity, or it has to have 100% of its output assigned to a municipality or other governmental entity, and it has to be situated on a property that is publicly owned. The energy storage adder is something that is new, so we do just have one single adder category for all energy storage that meets certain eligibility criteria and requirements. The adder is variable, so it's based on a ratio of the storage capacity to the PV capacity and also the duration of the storage unit. So we have a formula that's designed to provide more value to higher capacity and longer duration storage. The formula has a base adder of 4.5 cents per kilowatt hour, and the adder will also decrease by 4% per block along with the other adders. Facilities that are smaller than 25 kW will also be able to receive a storage adder. Those facilities are not eligible for the location or the off-taker-based adders. And if UER amends the APS regulation at some point in the future to include storage, then projects that are receiving the energy storage adder that generate AICs or alternative energy certificates, those certificates will be transferred to the distribution companies for APS compliance in the same way that the RECs that are being generated by the PV under the SMART program will be transferred to the generation units, to the distribution companies. So we've done a lot of work at DOER around looking at storage and the many benefits storage has, not only for the system owner but for the grid. Especially, there are a lot of benefits directly provided to the grid. It improves power quality support. It allows for rapid ramping to reduce the intermittency of solar. It also allows for energy generation to be shifted to reduce peak demand. And it reduces the strain on the distribution system when we have times of minimum load but high PV output. The adder is structured to realize these benefits and is consistent with our state of charge report. And as I said before, it provides greater value to projects with higher storage capacity and longer duration. So this is the energy storage adder matrix. So essentially, there's a complicated formula that provides these outputs. So you can determine what adder you would qualify for by looking to this grid. So if you have a storage unit that's 50%, the capacity of the storage unit is 50% of your PV installation, and it runs for 3 hours, then you would qualify for 5.65 cents for the adder. So really, you just look at what's the rated capacity and what's the duration of the battery, and then what's the ratio of the capacity of the battery in relation to the capacity of the PV system. So to qualify for the SMART program, you have to submit an application to the Solar Program Administrator. And if you're not interconnected yet, you can qualify and reserve your spot. But to do so, if you're a project that's 25 kW or less, you have to provide an executed turnkey contract between the installer and the customer. And then if you're a project that's over 25 kW, you have to provide an executed ISA, or Interconnection Service Agreement. You have to provide proof of site control and all non-ministerial permits. You also have to submit a copy of the authorization to connect by the end of your reservation period to remain qualified and to actually begin receiving compensation. Blocks are reserved on a first-come, first-served basis. Incomplete applications can hold a position for some time to resolve deficiencies, so if you make a mistake, we totally understand. We'll have some sort of cure period for when you submit an application, and the administrator will follow up with you to fix the application. The initial reservation period is 12 months with certain extensions. If the project doesn't meet the deadline, then the capacity you lose your capacity reservation, and that capacity will be added to the block that's currently open. So if you had a reservation in block 2, 12 months goes by, and you lose your reservation, the capacity that you had reserved is now added to whatever block is currently open, so maybe block 3 or block 4. And projects that trigger a new block, so say there's only 1 megawatt left in block 2 and a 3 megawatt project comes in, then they'll receive a blended rate. So that 3 megawatt project would qualify 1 megawatt of their capacity at the block 2 rate, 2 megawatts of their capacity at the block 3 rate. Metering and reporting, you will have 2 separate meters, the utility customer meter and the production meter. The distribution companies will own both those meters under the SMART program, and they will give the data to the program administrator on a monthly basis. The technical requirements for the meters are still TBD, likely very similar to our existing requirements for revenue grade production meters. There will be a process to be established to make sure that the production meter data can be accessed by the system owner, or they may choose to own a redundant production meter so they can see the production themselves. And we may require a data acquisition system for all systems of the automatic third-party reporting companies that operate on a number of PV installations across the state already. And then for billing and crediting, the program administrator is going to collect the meter data from distribution companies, and from that data, they'll calculate the amount of incentive payments owed to the system owner, and then any credits to be applied to off-takers' bills. So that's, if you're a standalone all-in rate, it's just an incentive payment. If you're net metered, they figure out what your incentive payment is and what your net metering credits are. If you are on this alternative on-bill crediting mechanism, again, they determine your incentive payment and then the credits that you get. They'll invoice the distribution companies and make incentive payments to system owners, and they'll notify distribution companies of credits that need to be applied to off-takers' accounts. Class 1 REC ownership. So all of these projects will qualify for Class 1 under the RPS. And all those Class 1 RECs generated by the facility will be automatically transferred to the distribution company. So they will retain ownership of Class 1 RECs for as long as the facility is eligible to receive payments following a project eligibility period. So after that 10 or 20 years, the ownership rights of the RECs revert to the owner of the facility. And then each distribution company will be required to establish and maintain a generator account at the Municipal GIS to register individual facilities as the assets within that account. Municipal light plans. We have had several meetings with municipal light plan operators, basically since our first draw proposal in September. So we are working with them on a program specifically aimed at MLPs, and as soon as we have more information about that, we will share it with all stakeholders. So the process for implementing the SMART program begins with a DOER rulemaking. So basically when we file the emergency regulation. Once we file the emergency regulation, we have to conclude that rulemaking within 90 days. So the way that an emergency reg works is we file it, it goes into effect immediately upon filing, but within 90 days we have to have public hearings and a comment period. And then in parallel with that, we're going to be working with the distribution companies so that they can jointly issue an RFP for the solar program administrator, issue the RFP for the 100 megawatt competitive procurement, and file for the approval of the program and cost recovery from the DPU. So that will happen after the emergency regulation process by DOR is finished and finalized. And filing at the DPU begins the DPU proceeding, and then that will be a separate schedule established by the DPU. And then the program is effective upon DPU approval. So this is a very illustrative timeline. This is a work in progress, so just putting that caveat out there. We released the final program design in January. And probably next month, late April, probably early May, we're anticipating we'll be able to file the emergency reg. And then once we file the reg, we'll have the public hearing and the comment period. And then 90 days after that is when the final promulgation of the reg happens, so probably around July. And then around August, we're anticipating the distribution companies will be able to file with the DPU. They'll issue the competitive procurement and issue the RFPs to the solar program administrator. And then in September, the procurement results are announced, so you know exactly what the compensation rates will be for the program. And we select the administrator, looking at winter spring right now for 2018, that the DPU finishes its process, it approves the filing, and the program goes into effect. So because we're looking at a timeline that extends into next spring, next winter spring, we did just issue the final portion of the SREC 2 transition. So now projects that are greater than 25 kW, so we had a number of deadlines, January 8th and then May 8th. So projects either have met extensions by those deadlines, but we have a greater gap now. So we've issued a third extension to eliminate the gap between the programs. So the extension now goes through the start of the new program. Essentially, we are extending the construction deadline for all facilities to March 31st, 2018. So to secure an extension, you just need to submit an SQA on our online application and also a good cause extension form, which is located on the website. Just to clarify, you don't need to have already been qualified under SREC 2 to apply for this further extension. If it's a new project, you can also secure the extension and still qualify under SREC 2. So essentially, under this further extension, you have SREC factors that are approximately 30% reduced from our original SREC factors for the market sectors. So you can see them here. They're located also on the SREC factor guideline. And for projects 25 kW and under, when we initially filed the extension in April, we determined that projects that are 25 kW and under have an SREC factor of 0.8. So they will continue to qualify at that rate for that extension until the new program. Again, these current SREC factors apply only to projects that are greater than 25 kW. And you can just find additional resources and materials on our website here. Any questions?
Great, thanks, Katelyn. So we have a number of questions that have come in writing. Thank you very much. What we're going to do is just put people on hold for just a moment so we can take a look at the questions and try and group them into similar categories. And then we will come back and do our best to answer as many of them as we can. So this is an opportunity also for those of you who have not given us questions to do so now, again, using the Q&A box that you should find on your screen somewhere. So we will be back in just a minute. Okay, thanks everybody. Sorry about that. We are ready to go with our question and answer session. So we'll start with just sort of some basic, simple questions, and then I'll turn it over to Katelyn for some of the more detailed, more complicated questions. So there was a question here from someone who wanted to know whether we could email the slides out separately, and the answer to that is no. We will be posting the slides sometime next week, and that's the best way to access them. There was also a question, Joanne, for you related to the types of assistance that towns can get for projects under 25, solar projects under 25 kilowatts.
Sure. So through our Municipal Energy Technical Assistance Grants, communities are eligible to apply for assistance, whether it's hiring a consultant to do a feasibility study or hiring somebody to do some specific engineering work on a solar project on publicly owned property. There is a size requirement, and without having the application in front of me, I'm not sure how small you can go. Certainly we want to help all communities, but if the project is below maybe 15 kilowatts, that assistance wouldn't be available. But we will post the Q&A with the correct answer on the website as well. But I do know there is a size limitation to that.
Great, thanks, Joanne. Okay, so we are going to take these in the best order that we can. Katelyn, there were a couple questions here on the adders, which I think you might have addressed in the presentation, but maybe we can just do that quickly about whether or not the adders would see a 4% reduction, yep, and also whether you could aggregate the adders. Maybe you could just clarify those two items.
Sure. So the adders will go down by 4% each block, just like the base incentive rate. And you can aggregate the adders, but you can only take one per category. So meaning one from location-based, one from off-taker base, and then storage. So the three categories that we have up there. So you can't have two off-taker base adders that you're stacking on top of each other. You can just do one per category. And I see that there's a question about solar storage and assistance with financing. Currently, this program is not really aimed at helping to finance these projects. It's just the financing assistance is by providing an additional incentive for solar plus storage. DOER is certainly looking at other ways to support storage across storage installations across the state. For this program specifically, it's only the solar plus storage adder that's added to the for PV. A couple questions about how the clearing price is set, and the procurement. So the procurement is for 100 megawatts, and so all the blocks are 200 megawatts in size. So half of block 1 is going to be competitively procured. So the procurement will go out for projects over a megawatt, and how the price is actually set. So we get bids. We certainly, there will be requirements for projects to apply. So they will have to meet some certain eligibility requirements to submit an application to the procurement and to respond to the procurement. We do want to make sure that these are actual projects that are being bid in, and then you stack them up from lowest to highest and count up to 100 megawatts, and essentially that last project, that 100th megawatt, sets the price. So there's a question about how can you plan for these smaller installations, since the clearing price for the procurement is going to set the prices for the rest of the program. So that's why we do want to have the procurement done in advance of actually the program being rolled out. That we're planning for the procurement to be done probably late summer, early fall. So, and that is likely to be 6-7 months prior to when the actual program will begin. So you will have that time period to plan for your program and for your installations, and to kind look at what the prices are likely to be in the different blocks for different size categories. Okay. The next question is, if a developer signs a net metering contract with a public entity, is the amount received for this contract subtracted from the base rate? No. So what is subtracted from the base rate, it's not what the price of the contract is, but what the value of the actual net metering credit is. So we're not going to be looking at the prices in contracts. It's just going to be what is the net metering credit value for that project, and we net that out of what the overall compensation rate is for that project, and the difference is what you would receive in an incentive payment. Okay, so there's a question on if a solar is on a building roof but is connected to the distribution grid in order to receive a G1 rate as compared to a G2 or G3, would the array be considered a behind-the-meter project or a standalone facility? So I think what the question is referring to is for a lot of large commercial buildings, what project installers and project owners have done to maximize the net metering credit value to date is generating a new standalone service and actually connecting, even though the project is located on the building, connecting the project directly to that new standalone service as opposed to behind the utility meter located at the building. So if a project does that under the SMART program, it would be considered a standalone project and would not be considered a behind the meter. It would only be considered behind the meter if it was directly serving some of that on-site load.
Did we answer that? Procurement, I think.
So you have a question on if a town is planning to establish a solar overlay district, at what point in the entitlement process of solar does the rezoning need to be completed? So it would need to be completed by the time a project that is looking to be built in that district applies for qualification in order to not have the subtractor impacted. So essentially, when a project comes to us and says, you know, we're looking to build at this site, but the town just created the solar overlay district and that's where I'm building, we say, great, the town has indicated that they want solar to be built there and that's what you're doing. So it's really just in, the timeline is in relation to when a project actually comes to us for qualification. Oh, the 30 cents is an example. So there's a question on the slide showing the behind-the-meter incentive calculation. The 30 cents kilowatt hour all-inclusive rate is an example. That's basically, we were saying, okay, if the procurement clears at 15 cents, then a project under that size category would be 30 cents. Volumetric distribution. Please define the terms volumetric distribution and transition. So volumetric distribution is directly tied to rates that are established on your energy bill, on your utility bill. So you have set rates that are calculated based on how much energy you're using. So that's what volumetric means, really, is that you have a transmission and transition rate calculated at, you know, a certain portion of a penny per kilowatt hour, and based on how much energy you're using by the grid, that's how much the utility will charge you every month on your utility bill. So that's what we're looking at. Question on what counts as a non-ministerial permit. A non-ministerial permit is anything that requires a local board or local authority to approve it. So these aren't kind of just your building permits, your electrical permits. These are, do you need zoning approval? Do you need the Conservation Commission to vote and to approve? Things like that. That's a non-ministerial permit. So there's a question on if a facility is installed behind an MLP and wheeled into an IOU. So I think this is asking on it basically if it's actually located in a town that's served by a municipal light district, but you run lines and interconnect to the town next door is an IOU service territory, and you actually interconnect there. I mean, we're looking at where you're interconnecting. So it's the meter that you are interconnecting to, is it run and operated by an investor-owned utility? That's what we're looking for smart qualification. Yeah. Okay, so there's a question on how SMART will replace or meet the role that SRECs play today for buyers that are not IOUs, but they're looking to offset and for green community choice aggregation. So all the projects that qualify under the SMART program will be generating RECs. They'll be generating Class 1 RECs. And while these RECs will go to the investor-owned utilities, we anticipate that the number of RECs that they're actually receiving will far exceed what their compliance obligation will be, and they'll be selling them into the market. So these RECs will still be into the market along with every other Class 1 qualified unit that's currently operating in Massachusetts or in New England that is qualified under Class 1 right now. So the question on who would receive the SMART incentives in a third-party ownership PPA model. Is it the system owner or developer, the host customer? Would there be an administrative fee for the solar program administrator? Okay, so the incentive payment is going to the system owner. So if it's a third-party ownership, then whoever that third-party owner is the one to actually receive the incentive payment. There may be an administrative fee to apply to the program under the Solar Program Administrator. We haven't determined what that rate would be yet, or if there would be a fee. Yeah, okay, so there's a question on market sectors. So that's market sectors are the market sectors as currently defined under the SREC 2 program. So the market sectors aren't changing. They're just the categories that we're qualifying projects under SREC 2. So market sector A for over 25 are your community solar projects. They're your low-income projects. They're your emergency power projects and solar canopies. Market sector B is building mounted. And if you're a ground-mounted unit, that serves 67%, at least 67% of the output is serving on-site loads. Market sector C is brownfields, landfills, and ground-mounted systems up to 650 kW. And then managed growth is anything larger than 650 that doesn't fall into any of those other categories. After the procurement, the rates will be set statewide. The small project incentive rates will also decline in fixed percentages after block 1. So like every other rate, they'll go down by 4% per block. No. Okay, so there's a question on behind the meter systems, and will you be paid an incentive on the energy that is consumed on-site and not exported? Yes, so the incentive is paid based on the production of the system. So basically, whatever is produced, that's how the incentive rate is calculated based on your total production. So anything that's both consumed on-site and exported, it's just the total production of the system. Okay, so there's a question about the SREC factor only going down for projects over 25 kW. So the SREC factors for the SREC factors that are announced for projects under this final extension for SREC 2, they are only for projects over 25 kW because we've established a step down for 25 kW and less. So they will be, projects 25 kW and under will be qualified at a 0.8 SREC factor from now until the new program starts. Oh, yeah. So there's a question about a net metering cap with SMART. So the net metering cap still applies to net metered projects. So net metering rules and regulations continue as they have been, continue to operate as they have been operating. Projects can be net metered projects and receive a SMART incentive payment if net metering is available. What we're proposing is this alternative to net metering, which is the proposed on-bill crediting mechanism. So since this is separate from net metering, it's outside of the net metering cap, which is what our intent was, that if we start the SMART program, the net metering caps have been hit. I mean, they've been hit in certain service territories. The private cap and grid has been hit for a while now. We're approaching the caps in Municipal. Projects will be able to access some sort of on-bill crediting mechanism outside of net metering under this proposed new structure that's tied to the SMART program. Right. So the difference between net metering and on-bill crediting, so we're not touching net metering. We're not changing net metering. Net metering, the rates that are calculated for net metering credits are established now. We did just move to the market net metering credit, but the rules and regulations for net metering is something we're not touching. This alternative to net metering, or this on-bill crediting mechanism, it allows projects to function in a way and to utilize an on-bill credit in the same way they've utilized net metering credits to date, but they won't be net metered facilities. They would qualify under this alternative mechanism. So the rate is something that, as I said, we've been discussing it sort of among stakeholders and with the utilities at a rate that's equal to basic service. The actual rate won't be determined until the DPU approves this mechanism. So it's just something that allows projects and allows systems to assign on-bill credits to other off-takers. So it enables projects to be community shared solar, to be low-income projects, to be public projects without needing to utilize net metering credits, because they have this additional crediting mechanism that will be formalized and finalized at the DPU. So there's a question on clarification. A standalone project does not require a specific off-taker. That is correct. So if you just build a standalone canopy that's connected to the grid and you qualify for your base compensation rate plus the canopy adder, then you're just selling to the utility. You're basically getting one payment, and that payment encompasses energy and RECs. So it's just one payment based on your production for 20 years. You only really need to have an ability to assign bill credits if you're looking to qualify for one of the off-taker based adders. So it's only if you're looking to be a community solar project, a public project, a low-income project, that you need an ability to assign bill credits and therefore access those adders. You don't need, if you're just looking to build a project and just literally just sell all your energy to the grid, that's all you need to do. Oh, I think I just said that.
Yeah.
So there's a question on public facilities having to be owned or operated by the public entity. So public facilities can either be fully owned or operated by the public entity, or they can be located on public land with 100% of the output going to a public facility. So you can still have these third-party PPA agreements where, but we just want to make sure that the land that the project is being built on is also publicly owned, in addition to 100% of the output going to the public entity. Yeah, so there's a question on the amount of compensation received, whether it varies depending on the compensation mechanism chosen, so net metering versus on bill. So how the structure works, it's the all-in compensation does not vary. So say you have a project that qualifies for a 17-cent all-in rate that is net metered, and then another similar project that also qualifies for a 17-cent rate all-in that gets the on-bill credit. They both will always receive 17 cents. What may vary is what the on-bill credit portion that's being netted out of that 17 cents is. So if you have, you know, the product that's net metered, say their net metering credit value is 10 cents, then they'll receive a 10-cent net metering credit rate, and they'll get the 7 cents for the incentive. If the on-bill crediting mechanism project that's also qualified for 17 cents has a credit rate, the on-bill credit rate of 7 cents, they'll now have 7 cents netted out and receive 10 cents as the cash payment. So it's really just what the makeup, it's the makeup that varies. It's not the total compensation rate that varies. Mm-hmm. So there was a question about the clearing price for the auction and whether bids will be vetted to discard entities that are extremely low. So we're under the current proposal, we don't have a mechanism to do so. We do understand that there is some concern about low bids coming in and setting the price too low. Basically, and because of that concern, there have been comments made by the solar industry asking for a floor price for the auction as well as the ceiling price. So right now we aren't proposing a floor price, but we do understand the concerns around this. Again, this detail, along with many of the other details of the program, are subject to change when we file the emergency regulations, since we are going to go through a public comment and a public hearing process. So we expect to receive comments on this from the solar industry. The question on when credits get distributed to customers, so how far in arrears. So you get a credit from the point that you start production, essentially, and you are authorized to interconnect by the utility company. So you get your qualification and you get your block reservation before you're built or before you're finished building, and then you actually start getting payments once you are producing. And right now on the SREC minting and payment schedule, there is like a 2-quarter delay, so we may incorporate a similar delay, so you won't actually get paid for your energy produced in January, maybe until July, but that's a detail that we still need to work out, but we'll likely do some sort of delay just to have the ability to review and verify the production data, make sure everything is fine. And then, but you will get paid from the point that, if you're qualified, from the point that you start actually producing energy and you are authorized to interconnect by the utility company. Right. No. So there's a question about if a homeowner installs a ground-mounted system, maybe because the roof isn't great on your home. So there's no penalty for that. There's actually no penalty for ground-mounted systems that are 500 kW or less. We're really only looking at that greenfield subtractor for large ground-mounted systems. So otherwise, if you're a homeowner and you install a 12 kW system, whether or not it's installed on your roof or whether or not it's installed on the ground, it doesn't matter. You receive the same compensation.
Sorry, we're just getting close to 12:30, so we're just looking to see if there's some key questions that have not been addressed yet, so just bear with us.
There's a question on folks, people that already have a project that's qualified for SREC 1 or SREC 2. So that is those are separate programs. If you have an SREC 1 or SREC 2 qualified project, you will continue to receive SRECs for the duration of your qualification period in those programs. If you're looking to install a new project and the SMART program is available at that time, then you would just qualify that project separately under the SMART program.
There's a question that says, these are all very good questions, and you'd like to see the answers to these questions posted, and we will be taking these questions and providing written answers and posting those as well.
And then a question about, do small projects get counted in the procurement block caps, the 100 megawatts? No. So projects, smaller projects, when block 1 opens up, they just apply at that point, and they're counted towards that block, but not to the competitive procurement. Yeah. So again, these are right now our proposed details for the program. This is still very much a work in progress. So when we file the regs, right now we're looking at filing really next month, kind of late April, maybe even early May. You'll see the final version of this and kind of like what we've come to. But we'll then go through a full public process at that point. So you'll be able to provide comments. We'll have a public comment period. We'll be hosting at least one, probably more than one public hearing on the program design, and we'll be posting notices about that. So if you are included on our listers and our email listers, we'll provide notice for this, and you'll be able to provide feedback to us, further feedback on the program design at that point.
And we'll be discussing the degree to which it might make sense for us to do another presentation on a new version of the program that might be coming out with any changes, and we'll certainly let people know what opportunities there are to learn about any upcoming details in the SMART program. So I think with that, we are at 12:29. So thank you very much, everybody, for participating in this webinar. Hopefully this has helped you to understand at least a little bit with more clarity what the SMART program is and how, and at least right now, what the current thinking is regarding the program. As we've stated, there will be lots of information coming out, both in relation to this webinar as well as to the rules that, regulations that get filed. So there will continue to be opportunities for all of you to provide comments along the way and to learn more, hopefully, as we do additional presentations. With that, right, I think we're all set.
We're all set. We're going to close the site down. Thank you all.
Thank you very much.